Welcome to the Elder Darkness. Tonight we drift far across the sundering seas, where a hidden island waits, an emerald jewel cradled by ocean mists and star-washed skies. You're weightless, floating above blue-green waves that stretch endlessly, until a mountain peak rises like a tooth from the depths. The air smells of salt and strange flowers, and the starlight touches the island like a blessing. This is Númenor, the land of gift, and tonight you probably won't survive its rise, not because of battle or monsters, but because sleep will claim you before you ever see the wave that ends it all. So before we start entering the world of Middle-earth, please take a moment to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, but only if you feel comfortable with this Middle-earth legend, and feel free to post your location and local time below, because I promise you're not the only one trying to fall asleep while learning Elvish history. Now, lie back and relax as we travel to the world of Middle-earth. Island from the sea, the Valar raise Númenor from the ocean and offer it to the Edain, beginning a golden age of men watched over by the elves and stars. The story begins in twilight, just after the War of Wrath. Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, has been cast out into the void, and the world reshaped by cataclysm. The elves who fought beside the Valar are offered passage back to the Undying Lands. But for the mortal Edain, the three houses of men who stood with them, something different is promised. The Valar, in their subtle wisdom, do not grant men eternal life. Instead, they raise from the depths of the sea a new land, Ander, the land of gift. It is said the island forms in a single day, lifted from the ocean by the will of the Valar, its coasts kissed by warm breezes, its heart dominated by a tall, lonely mountain, Meneltarma, the pillar of heaven. To this land, the Edain are led across the sea on ships guided by the star of Eärendil, whose light still gleams faintly in the evening sky. When they arrive, they weep with awe. The forests are filled with birdsong, the rivers flow with clean snowmelt, and the fruits of the land grow sweet and wild. Some even claim the very air smells faintly of the blessed realm, though Middle-earth historians still debate whether that's poetic metaphor or an actual atmospheric phenomenon. Their first king is Elros, son of Eärendil and brother to Elrond. While Elrond chooses immortality and remains in Middle-earth, Elros chooses the gift of men, becoming mortal and extraordinarily long-lived. He rules for over 4 centuries, founding the line of kings of Númenor. Elros is wise, tall, and revered, though one report says he had an odd habit of naming pets after Valar nicknames, which might explain why his favorite goat was called Almost Socks. Under Elros and his descendants, the Númenóreans flourish. They build tall white towers, roads paved with pearl-colored stone, and harbors that gleam like shells in the sun. Their ships grow sleeker and faster, and their sails carry the swan emblems of peace. And though they are forbidden from sailing west to the Undying Lands, they learn to master the waves in every other direction. The Elves of Tol Eressëa visit often, bringing gifts of lore and song, and teaching the Númenóreans how to read the stars like books. The island's calendar is shaped by the seasons and the moon, and each year ends with a 3-day festival where people wear silver masks and try not to trip on ceremonial cloaks. Somewhere in there, the tradition of skywatching from Meneltarma begins, a sacred pilgrimage where one climbs to the mountain's flat summit to gaze in silence at the night sky. It's peaceful and slightly chilly, and every third pilgrim forgets to bring snacks. Meanwhile, across the sea, Middle-earth still simmers with wildness. Orcs skulk in the east, men war with one another over muddy rivers, and strange creatures dwell in the mountains. But the Númenóreans remain apart, viewing the world with both curiosity and caution. They send envoys, bring gifts, trade with friendly tribes, and leave behind tall stone markers carved with star runes. Somewhere in Eärendil, local fishermen still whisper about the sea ghosts, fair-skinned giants who spoke a language that sounded like singing. Two events from the main Lord of the Rings storyline begin to echo faintly across this age. First, the line of Elros that begins here will eventually lead to Aragorn, King of Gondor and Arnor in the Third Age. Yes, the same Aragorn who broods handsomely in corners and probably never finishes his ale. And second, the reverence for the elves that starts now will ripple down into the Third Age's fellowship, especially in Frodo's starry-eyed reaction to Galadriel, which makes you wonder if he ever got over her. But back in Númenor, time flows like honey. Generations pass. Each king lives long and dies wise, and the people grow tall, strong, and curious. They begin calling themselves the Dúnedain, the men of the West. Their language, Agenaic, blends elvish grace with human grit, and scholars later spend whole lifetimes trying to pronounce it without sounding like they're choking on a breadstick. One curious tidbit from early records. It's said that at night, the animals of Númenor gather on certain hills and face west, silently watching the sea. Some claim they can sense the hidden presence of Aman beyond the horizon. Others just think the goats like the breeze. Yet the ban remains firm. No mortal may sail west toward the blessed realm. Not even the kings. Not even Elros. They can look, they can yearn, but they cannot reach. And so begins the quiet tension at the heart of Númenor. A paradise with a locked door. Kings and star wisdom. The early Númenóreans grow mighty in seafaring and lore, forging deep ties with the Eldar, until ambition begins to creep in like fog over calm water. The centuries unfold like sails catching wind. Númenor grows not just in strength, but in brilliance. Its harbors shine like polished ivory, and cities of gleaming stone crown its hillsides. The people grow taller, longer-lived, and more learned than any other mortals in Middle-earth. The island becomes a lighthouse to the world, except, of course, one that's not supposed to shine west. The early kings are thoughtful stewards. Taramandil, Tarelendil, Tarmenelder, each rules with a blend of humility and vision. Under them, seafaring becomes an art form. The Númenóreans don't just sail, they glide. Their ships cut the waves like knives of moonlight, bearing scholars, cartographers, and explorers. Some ships even carry astronomers, who chart the stars while drinking hot wine and arguing over whether the constellation known as Varda's crown looks more like a crown or a slightly broken tiara. The elves still visit, sailing in white swan ships that glimmer like frost. They bring gifts, music that sounds like falling snow, tomes written in golden script, saplings descended from Telperian's memory. The Númenóreans cherish these exchanges. They learn elvish histories, master arts, and adopt elven architecture. Vaulted halls, spiral towers, soft candlelight. Cities like Armanellos and Romena pulse with an elegant confidence. But with greatness comes curiosity. And with curiosity, well, you know how this goes. Some Númenóreans begin to ask inconvenient questions. Why can't we sail west? If we've earned the love of the Valar, why withhold the one thing we truly envy? The Undying Lands and the gift of eternal life? Tarmenelder, though wise in the stars, starts to see these questions swirling like storm clouds. When his son Eldarion takes the throne as Tar Eldarion, things really start to shift. Eldarion is not just a king, he's a sailor king. He loves the sea more than the land. He builds massive fleets and opens new routes to Middle-earth. He marries late and poorly. His wife Eärendil never forgives his love for the waves. Their fractured story becomes something of a royal soap opera, with long absences, angry letters, and one particularly frosty dinner where no one speaks except to pass the salt. But Eldarion's passion opens doors. He begins establishing haven towns along the coasts of Middle-earth, where Dúnedain can trade, teach, and observe. These outposts are the ancestors of cities like Pelargir and Umbar. names that will echo in the wars of Gondor long after Númenor sinks beneath the sea. Remember when Frodo and Sam look out over the river Anduin and see Argonath, those giant stone kings? That sort of monumental pride starts right here. The Númenóreans begin raising statues, claiming coastlines, and believing, quietly then more loudly, that they might just be superior to all other peoples. Still, the faithful remain. These are Númenóreans who cling to old ways, honoring the Valar, cherishing elven friendships, and avoiding political Facebook groups. They climb Meneltarma to watch the stars in silence, whispering prayers in the Quenya tongue that is slowly being nudged aside by Agenaic. There's even a law passed banning Quenya from official use, because nothing says we're totally fine like outlawing poetry. Middle-earth historians still debate whether this shift toward Agenaic was purely cultural or sneakily political. Either way, it marks a turn. The golden light begins to dim. In this growing tension, two key seeds from the later Lord of the Rings story are planted. First, the haven of Andúni rises in western Númenor, a peaceful stronghold of the faithful. From its line will come Eärendil and Isildur, the last lords of Númenor who survive its fall and found the realms of Gondor and Arnor. Yes, that's the same Isildur who later cuts the ring from Sauron's hand and promptly refuses to throw it into a volcano. We all have regrets. Second, the Númenórean tradition of burial in elaborate tombs begins to spread, especially among the kings. Giant sepulchres lined with gold and lit by sunshafts become popular, though some nobles prefer to be buried at sea, encased in shells of pearl and driftwood. One famously eccentric lord requested to be entombed with a live parrot and a half-written sonnet. The parrot, allegedly, escaped, but deeper currents stir. Eldarian's seafaring descendants begin to look east not just for trade, but for influence. They grow restless, uncomfortable with the boundaries the Valar have imposed. Why, they wonder, should men be denied the immortality of the elves? This longing becomes a whisper that begins to echo. One peculiar footnote from this period is the tale of the Tower of Tartalpirion. She is one of Númenor's rare ruling queens, a stern and bookish woman with little patience for suitors. Instead, she constructs a massive observatory where she charts the heavens with near-elvish precision. It's said she once refused a marriage proposal during an eclipse, claiming the timing was symbolically poor. Honestly, fair. During her reign, the line of succession starts to wobble. She names her nephew Tar-Minestir as heir. He is powerful, curious, and destined to face the rising shadow of Sauron across the sea. That's right. While Númenor debates linguistics and marriage politics, Sauron is over there quietly rebuilding. He's no longer just some surviving lieutenant of Morgoth. He's growing into his own role as Dark Lord who sends really charismatic letters, and he's watching Númenor closely. Shadow beneath the waves, Sauron's growing power in Middle-earth tempts Númenor's kings to intervene, while strange omens and banned languages hint at a darkening heart. The sea no longer feels like a boundary, it feels like a challenge. By the time Tar-Minestir dons the scepter, Númenor is at the height of its glory. Ships as grand as cities sweep across the waves, their sails stitched with stars, their hulls lined with polished hardwoods brought from Middle-earth forests no one else dares to enter. Their arrival on foreign shores is nothing short of divine theater, trumpets, polished armor, and that general "we're better than you" energy. But across the sea, another presence is growing, darker and more deliberate. Sauron, once a shapeshifter and servant of Morgoth, now reigns from his fortress in Mordor. He wears many masks: a sorcerer, a king, a bringer of gifts. He crafts the one ring, binds the other rings to his will, and declares himself Lord of the Earth. It's all terribly theatrical and deeply effective. Sauron's dominion spreads like spilled ink across Middle-earth. By the time he begins waging war on the elves, even the mighty Gil-galad in Lindon sends desperate messages westward. Númenor answers. Tar-Minastir sends a fleet so vast it blackens the sea. When his armies land, they turn the tide of the war against Sauron, breaking his siege and scattering his forces. This is the famed War of the Elves and Sauron, the same war in which Celebrimbor dies defending a region and the doors of Moria are sealed. Those very doors that Frodo and his companions will one day struggle to open with a password none of them studied properly. Númenor's victory is dazzling. Cities are freed, elves weep with gratitude, and Sauron retreats. Angry, wounded, and, most dangerously of all, humiliated. But victories come with consequences. The Númenóreans now feel not only powerful, but indispensable. They begin establishing permanent strongholds in Middle-earth, especially along the coasts. These are no longer just friendly ports or watchtowers, they're colonies. The line between ally and overlord begins to blur. Among the ruling elite, two factions slowly form. The King's Men, those who favor dominance, glory, and separation from elves and Valar, and the faithful, who still whisper the old prayers, still gaze west from Meneltarma, and still write poetry in Quenya, even if it has to be passed off as exotic bird names. The King's Men grow in number. Each successive ruler begins to lean a little more into grandeur, control, and suspicion. Even their names become harsher, heavier with Agenaic pride. One notable example is Tar-Kalmasil, who expands Númenor's military presence so far into Middle-earth that locals begin to refer to the Dunedain as Sea Kings, and not in a nice way. Meanwhile, Sauron hasn't forgotten. His spies report everything. The growing pride, the internal division, the fading reverence for the Valar. He's patient, and he understands human nature far too well. By the time Eärendil rules, Númenor is officially no longer the paradise of Elros. The elves are forbidden to land openly. The use of elvish tongues is outlawed in public spaces. The sacred mountain, Meneltarma, is now largely ceremonial, a backdrop for royal declarations rather than reverent silence. And yet, even in these shadows, some sparks remain. The House of Andúni, descended from the ancient lords of the West, quietly nurtures the faithful. Among them is a man named Eärendil, noble and wise, and his son Eärendil, who will eventually sail into legend, and into a rather awkward alliance with Gil-galad involving a mountain, a sword, and a certain finger incident. But we're not there yet. Sauron makes his move not with armies, but with charisma. He allows himself to be captured, yes, intentionally, by Eärendil, the last and proudest king of Númenor. The event is both legendary and deeply strange. Númenórean historians describe Sauron appearing in golden chains, smiling like he already owns the place. It's essentially the world's most sinister job interview. Instead of executing him, Eärendil brings him to Númenor as a prisoner guest. Big mistake. Sauron works quickly. He flatters, whispers, advises. He spins tales about the true nature of death, about how the Valar have kept immortality for themselves, about how men are meant for more. The king listens. The court listens. Soon, a great temple to a shadowy new god rises in the capital. A temple where sacrifices are made, and not of fruit baskets. It's said that Sauron even manipulates the language of the people, twisting Agenaic words into darker shapes. Some scholars argue that his greatest weapon was not sorcery, but rhetoric. Middle-earth historians still debate whether the corrupted Agenaic used in these rituals was a true magical language, or just a particularly aggressive form of legalese. During this grim transformation, a lesser-known curiosity emerges: the tale of the Black Flame. According to one scroll, Sauron convinces the king's priests to keep a single flame burning in the temple, said to be kindled from the fire of Mount Doom itself. Whether it's literal or metaphorical is unknown, but the temple's altar was always warm, even in winter. Meanwhile, the faithful grow desperate. They hide relics, smuggle books, and teach their children the old names of the stars. They're watched, harassed, occasionally imprisoned. The island that once sang with joy now hums with suspicion. The skies feel darker. Even the sea is less friendly. Storms appear more often, the stars shift subtly, and it's said the winds whisper warnings in Quenya, which is awkward when no one's supposed to speak it. And still, the ban remains. No mortal may sail west. But Eärendil listens to Sauron. And what Sauron suggests next is unthinkable. Sail west, invade the blessed realm, take immortality by force. It's a ridiculous plan, blasphemous.
Impossible.
Doomed. Naturally, the king immediately begins construction on the largest fleet ever seen. Downfall of the proud Eärendil's arrogant war against the Valar cracks the world itself, and Númenor sinks beneath the sea, leaving only echoes, legends, and exiles. The docks groan with the weight of ambition. Eärendil's fleet is not a navy, it's a continent on the move. Hundreds of towering ships, their sails black and gold, rise like islands in the harbor. The people of Númenor, once lovers of peace and poetry, now cheer for war. Trumpets blare, sacrifices burn in the temple, and whispers of eternal life ripple through the capital like wildfire through dry grass. Sauron watches from the shadows, smiling. The fleet sets sail. The sea does not resist. In fact, it remains eerily calm. The sky is unnaturally clear. The winds seem to part for the sails. This alone should terrify everyone involved. When the world cooperates too quietly, it usually means something very large is holding its breath. The ships cross into forbidden waters. West of Númenor, the world has always been veiled. No mortal may find the Undying Lands. But Eärendil presses forward. Behind him, the ocean hisses. Before him, the sky begins to glow. And then land, Aman, the blessed realm. White shores, golden light, and the mountain of the Valar rising like a dream at the edge of vision. It's beautiful, still, silent. The Númenórean army lands with armor gleaming and weapons drawn. They expect resistance, perhaps fire or wrath or divine armies. Instead, they are greeted with nothing.
No swords, no speeches.
Just silence and light. Then the world changes. Eru Ilúvator, the One, intervenes directly.
No Valar, no messengers.
Just the original creator of all things deciding, finally, that enough is enough. The shape of the world is broken. A chasm opens between the seas. The fleet is swallowed by the abyss, ships crumbling like dry leaves. The island of Númenor buckles, shakes, and sinks. Mountains collapse. Cities vanish beneath waves. The temple is the last thing to fall, and for a brief moment, the flame atop it flares white-hot, then blinks out. Sauron's body is destroyed in the cataclysm, but his spirit survives. He returns to Middle-earth, hideous, bound to darkness, no longer able to assume a fair form. It's basically the worst plastic surgery outcome in the history of Arda. And Númenor? Gone. A memory, a legend, a sunken echo. But not all is lost. Eärendil, son of Eärendil, survives. Warned in time, he and his sons, Isildur and Eärendil, gather the faithful, board 9 ships, and flee east. They ride the waves like leaves in a storm. Lightning rends the sky. Towers fall behind them, but they survive. When the storm passes, they arrive on the shores of Middle-earth. Scattered, shaken, but alive. They found 2 realms, Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. High among the White Mountains, they raise Minas Ithil and Minas Aenir. They plant the White Tree again. They remember Númenor in their speech, their laws, their towers. Isildur, who once risked his life to save a sapling of the White Tree from the Temple of Sauron, becomes a king. Yes, that Isildur. He'll later become famous for defeating Sauron in battle, and even more famous for not throwing the ring into Mount Doom when he had the chance. But tonight, we'll let him rest. One rarely told tidbit. In the earliest days of Gondor, Elendil's court included a group of surviving shipwrights from Romena who insisted on building round houses shaped like ships. Locals referred to this neighborhood as Little Númenor. It lasted roughly a decade before someone lit a fire indoors and realized that ship design does not translate well to urban living. In the Third Age, the memory of Númenor lingers like perfume on empty clothes. Its ruins lie beneath the sea, unreachable. Occasionally, a mariner dreams of tall towers beneath the waves or hears bells in the deeps. The elves remember. The Dunedain remember. Even Sauron remembers and hates it. And so, the gift becomes a warning. The greatest kingdom of men, raised by the Valar, shattered by pride. From it, the bloodline of kings continues. Aragorn, in the final days of the Third Age, carries that legacy of wisdom, of fallibility, of hope. He walks the ruins of the world bearing the weight of sunken cities, unkept oaths, and the dream of a better reign. And somewhere, far beneath the ocean, the bones of Númenor sleep in salt and silence. Now, let it all slow. The winds fade from the sails. The sea becomes still. The golden cities of Númenor, once alive with music and flame, now rest beneath leagues of water, like old memories sealed in glass. You drift over them, not as a ship or a king, but as a breath, a whisper. The towers below sway gently in the tide. The light is dim, soft, comforting. The ghosts of the past no longer speak. They simply float. Let your thoughts fall with them. Let each worry drift away like a leaf in the current, untethered and slow. The mistakes, the victories, the golden pride of long-lost kings. All of it fades into the blue. High above, stars appear. The same stars that once guided Elros, that marked the pilgrimages to Meneltarma, that watched silently as the sea swallowed a kingdom. They remain, unchanged, gentle, and now you remain too, wrapped in the stillness of that deep, forgotten sea. Your breath is slow, your limbs heavy, the world distant and quiet. You don't need to remember every name or trace every fall. You are part of the current now, floating, calm, untouched by time. So close your eyes. The waves will carry you, and if you listen closely, you might still hear the white tree rustling in the wind.